What do you think the most common mistake someone makes when they're looking for a job or a change of career?
The thing that I see people doing most often is saying, I'll take anything. So they are going out and casting this really wide net, thinking that that's going to help them catch what they want.
Right.
And they end up pulling back nothing.
Right.
So what I help job seekers do is get more focused, really get passionate about what they're going after, because that's what's infectious. That's what an employer wants to see. An employer doesn't want to see someone walk through their door and say, oh, I'd like a job here, because it's a job.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. What would you say to somebody who feels that they're stuck in a position that they've been in and that they're fine at, but they want to grow, but they haven't quite discovered what that growth would be too? So how personally, do you ever coach people to personally find what career is best suited for them?
Yeah, I have my master's degree in counseling and career development, so that's kind of my specialty, helping people understand their strengths, their skills, their values. Our values play a lot into whether or not we're happy in a career, and those shift, so it's kind of a moving target for us. When we're 25, our values are going to be a lot different than when we're 50, and a lot of times we don't change jobs and our values change, and all of a sudden we're not really happy doing what we're doing anymore.
Sure.
So that I help people identify those things so that they can make a better decision as they're moving forward, or maybe just tweak what they're doing to be happier.
Right. What are some examples of techniques or tools you use in that exploration process?
Yeah, so I use a couple of formal assessments like the Myers-Briggs type indicator and StrengthsFinder, which is a fairly new assessment that identifies strengths for people. It's neat, gives you some verbiage about yourself that's pretty neat.
Right.
And then I use some card sorts in terms of being able to sort through our values and our skills and figure out which ones are most important to us.
Right. I took the StrengthsFinder test.
Yeah, did you like it?
I did, because I'm sort of resistant to the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
I feel like it confines people into categories, and that makes me uncomfortable, but Strengths felt a little more liberating. Do you want to describe what the StrengthsFinder test is?
So the StrengthsFinder takes people through a forced choice question system and then comes out with 5 themes that are the most important for you or the highest for you. A few of mine are strategic. That's why the name of my company was a Strategic Advantage, kind of playing on that. So I like to help people figure out a strategy to get to where they want to go. One of the other ones for mine was developers, so taking something and making it better. Do you remember any of yours?
I do. My number 1 was input.
Okay.
I like to absorb information and collect things.
Yeah.
Which really, I've the best use I've had is to explain to my wife that my clutter is a strength, not a weakness.
Yes.
And that my piles of paper are a good thing.
Yes, that's great use for the StrengthsFinder.
How important is grooming during a job interview?
I think it's more important than we want to think that it is.
Right.
So we want to say, my skills are going to get me the job. And especially in the competitive job market today, there's a lot of people running around with the skills. It's, can you make that good first impression? Can you have those good soft skills, as we might call them, to make a connection with employers? Because that's who they hire. They hire someone that they have a connection with.
Right.
So I think it's more important than we like to think that it is.
Right. Yeah, and we're also in an age where individuals do a lot more public sharing than they ever have with things like Facebook and Twitter and social media, which is great. Would you advise people, how would you advise someone, how am I trying to frame this question, who shares too much, and then employers might see that? Do you counsel on personal brand, I guess you would call it, through social media? Yes,
personal branding is important, and the first thing most employers do when they decide they're going to interview you is they Google you. They see your Facebook, they see your LinkedIn, and all of that needs to have a picture that is good, positive, and if you can, in line with what you're trying to do, in line with that brand that you're trying to say, this is who I am, this is what I do. I heard a great one the other day. A younger lady said, my Facebook is under a different name, so when an employer Googles me, they don't find it. And I thought, wow, that is smart.
Yeah,
I don't know how her friends find her, but
yeah, they don't.
and that's really important. Does your brand on LinkedIn, does your brand on Facebook all match? And making sure anything that's negative can be seen as negative about you is not available.
Right. And that's sort of creating the distinction between your professional and your private personal life.
Yeah.
I guess. Do you find that a lot of people live those double lives, where their professional brand and who they are at work is different than at home? Not like a spy type of thing, but maybe like that.
Well, I think a lot of us, and what I teach around business culture is that none of us grew up in a business culture. None of us wake up and look like this first thing in the morning. We all have to play that game. We all have to get in line with what business culture says we should look like if we're going to be hired into business culture.
Right.
So I think most of us are not business people all the time.
Right.
We have that fun side, and sometimes we get to bring that into the workplace, and sometimes we don't. Might depend on where we work.
Sure.
So yeah, most people have that other side, and it's good to show it in some ways and just not let it get too personal.
Of course. It seems like over the past few generations, there's been a shift of being loyal to a single company and rewarded for it throughout your entire life to changing from through many companies and maybe even many careers throughout your lifetime. Are people really today sort of independent contractors even when they have employers?
I am trying more and more to help people understand that is the case.
Right.
That if you are working for a company, unfortunately tomorrow they could lay you off.
Right.
Which was always possible, and now it's just more evident that it happens and it's going to happen. So it's understanding that the idea of job security is not working for one company, but the idea of job security is knowing where you're going, what your skill set is, and how you're going to get to the next place.
Sure.
So one example is my husband works at a company and he has a sales type of job where he does some sales work, meets with salespeople, goes to some of these types of events at an expo. Mm-hmm. And every time he comes home, I say, did you follow up? Keep contact with those people, keep them in your network. Because he's been laid off twice in the past 5 years.
Right.
And I know, although he doesn't really worry about it, I know that in the next few years he'll probably get laid off again. It's just, he's an engineer, and that's kind of the way that field goes.
Yeah.
And so keeping your network is so important for all of us, and I think we're starting to see that more and more, that things are changing faster, and you're going to have to be prepared to take care of your own career.
Right. Do you counsel companies on layoffs, on how to lay off with minimal heart breakage?
I do work with companies when they're laying off, how to support your employees through that transition, how to be able to give them some look at the future. I'm also working with John Bavosa, who wrote the book From Laid Off to Living.
Okay.
And that book goes through kind of the grief cycle that employees go through when they're laid off. And I think companies don't think about that it is a grief cycle. When you're laid off, it's losing a piece of your identity, especially if you've worked there for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
It must be difficult laying people off.
And that's what I think most companies feel like it's a part of their family, especially small companies, and many companies in Northern Colorado are smaller companies, and they really feel like they're letting someone down. So it's nice to be able to come in and help them through that process.
Right. In a broad sense, what do you, and this is just your opinion, what do you think needs to be done to lower the unemployment rate?
To lower the unemployment rate?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who say that the economy is not going to recover until unemployment numbers go down.
Yeah.
What needs to be done? It seems like lots of people have ideas and no one's right, and what's going on?
Well, and
how do you see it?
That's all job creation. So for unemployment to go down, there has to be more jobs.
Right.
So part of that is doing whatever can be done to incentivize new business, to incentivize people to hire. A lot of that goes to legislation, which gets into a big issue, but thinking about how difficult is it for a company to hire. There was recently an article, I believe in the Business Journal, maybe the Denver Business Journal, about how expensive it is for an employer to hire someone. And there's a barrier there in terms of, can you afford it? Can you afford to hire someone?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and the small businesses just face that startup problems and all of those legislative issues, I think are going to take a long time to change so that businesses can be created faster.
Right.
And hire faster.
And hire faster, which is the key.
Yeah.
Well, Marie, thank you so much for coming on Studio A-Train. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Stay tuned, and we will be right back with Studio A-Train here at Bixpo.